Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as medical, investment, or financial advice. We do not sponsor or endorse any of the individuals, companies, products, or services featured on this podcast. Any statements or opinions expressed are of the individual who makes them. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Prime Life Podcast. This is Joseph, and I'm here again with Mary. Mary, how you doing?
I'm great, Joseph. Yay! Love being with you and always with the amazing guests we have on. So, makes my day. This is the best part of my day, shall I say.
Excellent, excellent. So let's get right to it. Who is our guest today?
Absolutely. So today we have Debbie McCullough, and we were back and forth what her title really is, but she's a podcast extraordinaire. And she will tell us, I hope, Debbie, you're going to share with us how you unretired from being a pharmacist and how you're helping people who are considering retiring or in retirement with the podcast and all the great other things that you're sharing. So, Debbie, go ahead. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Thank you both so much for having me as your guest. I'm really thrilled to be here, and I can't thank you both enough. As you said, I used to be a pharmacist. I retired in 2018. I had a 40-year career that I just loved. And then then you have to find out what you're going to do for the rest of your life. So I was doing some traveling and a lot of volunteering in the long-term care facility and other places. And then in 2020, we all remember what happened, that pandemic. And so most of those exciting things dried up. So my husband and I couldn't travel. You couldn't travel. I couldn't. Volunteers weren't allowed into long-term care facilities. Most of our activities dried up. And I felt I really needed a project. So I thought about, podcasting might be something to look into. It was something totally new for me. However, once I started doing that, my husband became really ill. And he was diagnosed with bowel cancer. So my podcasting was put on the back burner for a significant length of time. And after many, many months of being very ill, he did pass away, unfortunately. And so after a bit of a time to kind of pick myself up again and figure out my life, I thought I was even more passionate about doing my podcast because it's older and bolder. And I interview women who are fearless, fabulous, and 50 plus. And it's really to celebrate life in our older years. So, of course, when my husband passed away, it made me even more passionate about doing that. And then I did launch in March of 2023. And I've loved every part of it since then.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing your story, and sorry about the loss of your husband. We talk a lot about aging and some of the pros and cons of that stage of life, and it sounds like to me, at least from this very brief intro, that you're a very really resilient person, and you're staying active, keeping your brain engaged in the world around you. So tell us a little bit about the podcast. Who are some of the people you've had on there? What are the topics you talk about? And we'll go from there.
Okay, I'd love to. I've been really fortunate to have amazing guests. There are so many incredible people out there in their older years. My guests have ranged in age from just 50 years all the way up to 93. And the 93-year-old I interviewed is still going strong. She did amazing things in her 70s and 80s and still leads choral groups and other things. But there's a few themes that seem to resonate with my guests. One of them is resilience. And I've had so many women that have gone through incredible adversity and come out the other side stronger and making a difference for others. Some of them are pursuing new passions once they change careers or reinventing themselves. And another theme that seems to resonate with so many of them is finding a purpose. And lots of times it's a new purpose, that reason to get up in the morning. And a lot of it can involve charities or doing other things. Do you want me to tell you about one or two of my guests?
Yeah, we'd love that.
Okay. Well, one in particular that comes to mind, her name is Bernadine Boulay. And in my province of Saskatchewan, there was a horrific bus crash that involved an entire hockey team, a fairly elite hockey team in the winter. And there were many, many hockey players, young hockey players in their teens and early 20s that did not survive that crash. And everybody else on the bus, suffered a lot of injuries, both mental and physical. Anyway, her son was one of the casualties of that bus crash. His name was Logan Boulay, but he did survive for a few hours and they donated his organs. So all of his organs were donated. But immediately after that, there was a huge movement all across North America, in the US, in Canada, and in other places around the world, where they had immediately 150,000 new organ registrants. So it was a movement where people were registering to be organ donors, and they call it the Logan Boulay effect. And coming up on April 7th, in just a few days, is something called Green Shirt Day. And so her and her husband have been very involved in that movement. The interview with her was very emotional and sad, but the light at the end of the rainbow was that so many people are living better quality of lives and even having a life much longer because of the Logan Boulay effect. And so they are, spreading the word big, big, big time. So, and they live in Lethbridge, Alberta, here in Canada.
So thank you for sharing that. It's heart-wrenching, but it's also inspirational. And really my question for you, Debbie, with guests that you mentioned like that, like what are some of the characteristics that you see that they share that they have to get them from, even your situation when you have a significant loss, your husband was very ill and then he passed, like what is it that helps people transition from really being like almost immobilized, if you will, and feeling, obviously down and rightfully so, to taking action, taking that next step to try to make sense out of it and feel some joy again, if possible.
And we'll get that answer after a brief word from our commercial sponsors.
NASA is always working harder to be your carrier of choice. We offer insurance products that can help you meet your retirement goals, such as protecting your savings, securing lifetime income, or paying for healthcare costs. We're dedicated to providing best-in-class service and are keeping things simple, and we'll have your back. We have around 400,000 policyholders and contract holders and have been doing this for a long time, 170 years, but we remain humble enough to always try to improve. For more information, visit nfg.com. NASA insurance products are issued by Nassau Life and Annuity Company of Hartford, Connecticut, Nassau Life Insurance Company, East Greenbush, New York, or Nassau Life Insurance Company of Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas. Subsidiaries of Nassau Financial Group. Products are not available in all areas. Policyholder counts are for all Nassau companies as of September 30th, 2022, and are subject to change.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question, and I don't know if there's really one answer. But for myself and what I've found by interviewing so many guests that have been in that position, it's like to allow yourself to feel the pain or go through what you've gone through, but then start focusing on what you're still able to do and what you're grateful for what you are able to do. Because we can only have our own pity party for so long, and grief is very complicated for everyone. It's, and losing a child is unlike anything I guess anyone could ever experience. Fortunately, my children are all alive and well, and they're adults, and I have two adorable grandsons. But I think that seems to be the theme, is to really allow yourself to feel the pain, and then every day or every week, figure out what you can do, and making a difference in the lives of others seems to be a theme that so many of my guests have moved on with, by helping others and realizing what they are still able to do and how they can contribute.
Very, very moving. I'm curious because I know Mary and I have been doing this podcast for, what is it, a year and a half now, maybe a little bit longer. We've been surprised and we've learned a whole lot. You've been doing your podcast, I think you said, about a year now. What's been the most interesting, surprising, enlightening? You choose the word from your experience.
Well, I think, first of all, it surprised me that I could actually do it. So that was just kind of a personal surprise. But one of the biggest surprises has been the reaction of the audience and the listeners, both to myself and the amount of audience that is really, we know the internet is worldwide, but it blows me away when I see so many of the countries where people are listening to it. But the reaction from the listeners, both to myself and to my guests, how they've maybe changed some things in their lives or were propelled to do something that one of my guests has shared. So it's really my guests that are so inspirational. And I have been also really surprised at so many of the guests, the longer you do the podcast, that are really happy to be on the podcast, and they'll be reaching out to be on it. But and the variation of their stories, it's just incredible. Yeah, so many of them that have gone through adversities or come out the other side, or just done some amazing things and continue to do so in their later years.
So I love hearing that, and we'll have to chat at some point later on to get some more tips from you regarding the success of your podcast. But I do give you a lot of credit for starting a podcast, because it could seem like an overwhelming thing to do, and also you're putting yourself out there, thinking, well, what if people aren't interested? And obviously they are interested in listening to you and the beautiful stories that you bring forward. So as I shared before we started our recording, our guests have been a wide range of individuals. Our audience, 55 plus people, thinking all different types of what's next in my life and whatnot. So, again, going back a little bit, you were a pharmacist. So I know you're super smart, by the way.
Oh, I don't know about.
No, I say that because I know the training that's involved in pharmacy, someone becoming a pharmacist, and really, and I'm not just blowing sunshine, as my daughter would say. So, you were this pharmacist, and, you also talked about, being in the area of gerontology. So, what's still your connection there? Like, or is there a connection? Do you ever kind of use that pharmacy, background in brain and gerontology in the work that you're doing with the podcast?
I think it definitely is a part of me. I mean, I was a pharmacist for many years. I loved all of it. One thing in the pharmacy career, during my 40-year career, we really had to do a lot of adaptability. The changes that took place when I first started practicing, I'm really dating myself now, there were no computers. Everything was done by hand. And then also the scope of practice for pharmacists grew and grew and grew during the time that I was a pharmacist. Also, the scope of medications grew and grew, and the amount of illnesses that they could treat. But our role really, really changed from being a dispenser of medications to the medication expert. So we, the last many years of my career, we were the consultants for the physicians and other healthcare professionals. We were the ones doing face-to-face medication assessments. We ended up being able to give injections and being experts in vaccinations. And once I did retire, I did go back and give some COVID vaccines because there was huge demand, as I'm sure you guys all know. And so I did do that for a short period of time after I had retired. I had still kept my license at that time. But yeah, so I think it stays with you. And as well as all the memories of all the amazing patients and clients that they really affect you long term. You really get to connect with them on a really intimate level when you're their pharmacist. And I practiced in a small town. So you get to see them when they're well, they come and talk to you. My practice really involved face-to-face time with my patients. Um, and I was very fortunate to have that. So I know not in every pharmacy setting, it might be not as as face to face as I was able to do that, but we see them when they're really unwell. We see them when they're very well, and we get to see them and their families and interact with them over a long period of time, as opposed to sometimes patients in a hospital that might be there on average 5 days and gone. We get to see them over years and years and years. And I practiced in my my same town for most of my years of practice.
A long career, lots of changes. It's
Yeah.
interesting. It's interesting to hear how the pharmacy business has changed. That could be a whole conversation for another time. Earlier in this episode, you mentioned that you started the podcast because of you had some loss in your family, looking for a new project. You mentioned, I believe, that you said women 50 plus. So not to be the odd man out, why not men?
Well, when I started, I didn't know where I was going to go with it. And to start with, I asked some people I knew or knew of as my guests. And I don't know, I just felt that strong connection. And I just thought, this is my sweet spot right now. I haven't totally ruled out men for the future, but right now I feel that that's the most comfortable for me. And Mary can probably relate to this. Us women talk all the time and really bare our souls, I think, more than men do a lot of the time. I know with my husband, they would more talk sports or construction or mechanics, but we really bare our souls, believe it or not, even in bathroom stalls or right, Mary? And so right now I feel like I I might expand to men, but I haven't yet, and we'll see where that goes. But that's a good question, Joseph. Thanks for asking.
Yes, it really is. And I had my mic on mute, but I was laughing, and you're absolutely right. And I'm sure you are exactly like this. I can be anywhere and people talk to me. Sometimes I just recounted something. I was in the entranceway of this restaurant and my husband went to get the car, and he was only gone for like 5, maybe 10 minutes. And so I got into the car and I said, "Oh, I just met this woman." And I told him all these things about her, and he said, "What?" He goes, "You were there." He goes, "How did that happen?" I said, "I don't know." But she told me some things that were very personal, and obviously she wanted to get off her chest, and I felt honored. So yes, I'm agreeing with you. And I love the fact that, there you are, hosting a podcast and giving that opportunity for women. And even though, like Joseph, right, we still love men like you because,
Yeah.
you're awesome too. But I just think that's also interesting that that's been your niche and so much your calling. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, so my first job many years ago, I worked at what we used to call drugstores. And we had a pharmacist, and there were a few of them, and they worked so hard and so long. And I was like actually thinking about what you said about the industry. counting
Mhm.
pills, no computers. I'm also dating myself as well. And, where from someone who's an outsider to see where pharmacy has gone. So I think that's fascinating in itself. Like many industries have changed so much. But my question for you, Debbie, is what kind of tips could you give individuals, like maybe one or two, something they could do tomorrow if they wanted, and then maybe one or two things they could maybe do down the road if they're in a situation where they've had to make a change, or they just want to make a change in their life because of whether it's been a tragedy or just they know that it's time and they want to live their best life, while they still can.
Well, I think one of those things is not to be so afraid to step out of our comfort zone. And I think once we get to be a certain age, too, for me, I'm not as worried about looking ridiculous or feeling ridiculous. So whether it's trying a new sport or trying a new career move or just stepping out of your comfort zone and doing something that feels a little uncomfortable, because if you don't like it, you just stop doing it. But if you do enjoy it and move on and keep going, the opportunities can be amazing. And we don't know what we don't know yet. So I'm really glad I've tried some new things, and I don't think we're ever too old to do that. So even if we maybe have lost some of our smooth skin that we had in our 20s, or our waistline doesn't look the same, or our gray hair, we're covering it up with hair dye. I'm pointing to my hair right now, but that we can focus on what we are able to do and what we do enjoy. And if we look back to what really did bring us joy at one time, believe it or not, the only time I ever was behind a mic at a job was during my university days. And I was the person in a store that was called Zellers. It was a department store, kind of a mini Walmart we had in Canada back in the day. This is in the 70s. And I got a job to make money during university as the store announcer. Hello, shoppers, welcome to Zellers. And the managers would bring me their specials they had on, and the restaurant manager would bring me that, and I would write up a script and announce in the store. And sometimes there'd be 10-minute sales, and every minute you'd be saying only 9 minutes left, only 8 minutes left. And I just loved that. So you remember times when you really felt joy in doing something. It didn't feel like a job to me. It just was really, really joyful. I loved that job. And that was so many years ago, but I remembered that, and you want to get that feeling back again in whatever you are doing.
I have so many comments to make. Last few minutes. I'm just gonna focus on the future here. Uh, uh, so let's talk a little bit about joy, I guess. What brings you joy these days? Like, I'm guessing the podcast brings you some joy. Tell us a little bit more. Talking
It
about
does. Well,
sharing, right? We're going to share.
Now, an ad from one of our sponsors. Remember when you could trust the news? Well, then check out Walter. Walter is the free, no-nonsense newsletter for grown-ups that comes to your inbox 3 times a week. From current trends, aging in place, travel, retirement, and everything in between, including a dash of pop culture trivia and throwbacks, Walter is a great way to start your mornings and to stay informed. Oh, and did we mention that it's free? Check us out at thisiswalter.com. Get smart. Get Walter.
yeah. Well, volunteering brings me joy. I volunteer in the long-term care facilities. I actually lead chair exercises with the residents who are like level 3 and 4. So they are high needs residents. Most of them are much older than I am. And so I do that. And I have a playlist with Dean Martin and a lot of other well known artists that have some amazing music that we all remember, and I enjoy that. I also volunteer with the Canadian Red Cross and have been on deployment with them during disasters. But I also get a lot of joy from my grandsons and my family and connecting with friends and podcasting. When I start preparing for podcasting, learning about my guests, oh my goodness, like they are really inspirational, and yeah, you guys can probably relate to that. It's it is really joyful. And then during an interview, I like it to sound like my audience is a fly on the wall just listening to two friends having coffee. And so we do have very intimate and candid conversations. And I always learn new things even during the time that we're speaking. And that does really bring me joy. Yeah, there's many things. I enjoy travel too. So there's always those moments of joy. And there's not moments of joy 24/7. Obviously, we have our moments where we need to reflect on some things that are sad and sorrowful, and then move on with the day. But I'm pretty fortunate. I have amazing friends and family, and cheering on my grandsons in their hockey games, that really brings me joy as well. And I think it brings them joy too, from what they tell me. And I get to go to a hockey tournament this weekend. So
I love that. I also love ice hockey, and my husband does as well. So I'm smiling about that, and that sounds wonderful. So as we're getting to the bottom of our hour, so to speak, with you, we always ask our guests one final question before Joseph will close us out. You are very accomplished. You've done a lot of interesting things in your life. You're a very smart woman, very capable. You could do anything you want to. Why do you get up every day and say, I want to do this podcast? I want to interview women who want to tell a story that I think others want to hear and that will resonate them. What's your why, Debbie?
Well, you've said some flattering things there about how accomplished I am. There's many things I can't do, so I do like to focus on some that I think I am able to do. I love to learn new things, so I think when we're learning new things, that's one of my whys. And I really enjoy meeting new people and learning about them, and that's part of my why as well. And I realize that if I want to contribute something to the world, and then the feedback I get. So I think that's my why. I try to get up and say, it's going to be a good day every morning, and then try to carry on with that. But it does bring me joy, and I guess that's my why. And in honor of family members that I lost way too early, I think it's a way to honor them and spread the word that if we get to live past age 50, it is a gift to be appreciated.
It's a great way to end. That's a great ending of this chat. So Debbie, thank you very much for your time today. What is a great way for people to find you, get in touch? And we'll put it in the show notes, but if there's one way you think people could remember, please share.
Sure. Sure. My podcast is called Older and Bolder, and it's on all the usual platforms. So please find me there. And I also have a website, Older and Bolder, the word and, olderandbolder.ca. The .ca stands for Canada. So olderandbolder.ca is my website, and my podcast is available on Apple, Spotify, Google, and SoundCloud.
I'm glad you clarified you're from Canada. Just
kidding. I am.
Just kidding with you. Just kidding. Thank you again for your time, Mary. Always a pleasure chatting with you. I'll let the two of you coordinate a time to use the ladies' room together and continue the conversation. For all of our listeners, thank you for joining us today. And tune in next week for another episode of the Prime Life Podcast. Thank you all.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed our time together.
Remember to subscribe to the Prime Life Podcast anywhere you find podcasts. You can find all of our episodes, contact information, and more on our website, primelifepodcast.com. Stay connected with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.